What if the most dangerous place you could be was at a dinner table surrounded by people who called themselves your friends? On the night of October 14th, 2019, 6 guests were invited to a private estate in the rolling hills of Connecticut. By midnight, one of them was dead, and by morning, every single one of the remaining 5 had a reason to lie. This is the story of the Hartwell Dinner Party, and nothing about it was an accident. The Hartwell estate had stood for over 100 years, a grand Victorian mansion tucked behind iron gates and old oak trees that hadn't let in proper sunlight since the 1940s. To the locals, it was just the house on Blackamoor Road. To those who knew its owner, it was a place where secrets lived comfortably. Richard Hartwell was 58 years old, self-made, sharp, the kind of man who remembered every favor he'd ever done for someone and never let them forget it. He'd built his fortune in pharmaceutical distribution, a business that, as investigators would later discover, had more gray areas than a foggy November morning. That October night, Richard had invited 5 people to dinner. Not just any people. These were individuals with specific, complicated ties to him. A business partner, a lawyer, a young woman named Cara, his assistant of 3 years, and finally, his estranged brother, Marcus, who hadn't set foot in the estate for over a decade. The chef prepared 5 courses. The wine was expensive. The conversation, by all accounts, was tense. By 11:47 p.m., Richard Hartwell was found slumped in his chair at the head of the table. No signs of forced entry, no external wounds, just a man who had seemingly stopped breathing between dessert and the after-dinner brandy. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The medical examiner's initial report listed the cause of death as cardiac arrest, and that might have been the end of it, if it weren't for a single detail that the responding officer almost missed. Richard's wine glass had been switched. Security footage from the dining room. Yes, Richard filmed his own dinner parties, which tells you something about the man. Showed that at 11:31 p.m., while Richard stepped away to take a phone call, someone reached across the table and quietly exchanged his glass with an identical one. The footage was grainy, the figure's face hidden by shadow. So who was it? Let's talk about our 5 suspects. Suspect 1, Daniel Forsyth, the business partner. Turns out, Richard had been quietly funneling profits from their shared company into offshore accounts. Daniel had only discovered this 2 weeks before the dinner. His motive? A missing $4 million. Suspect 2, Gloria Hartwell, the ex-wife. Their divorce had been bitter and public. Richard had managed to keep the majority of the estate through what Gloria's attorneys called manipulated documentation. She'd spent years fighting for what she believed was hers. Suspect 3, Victor Crane, the lawyer. Victor had drafted legal documents for Richard for over 15 years. He was also, investigators discovered, being blackmailed by Richard over a case from 2011, a case that, if reopened, would have ended Victor's career and possibly put him in prison. Suspect for Cara Mendez, the assistant. Sweet, quiet Cara who, it turned out, had been working as a confidential informant for a federal investigation into Richard's company. If Richard had found out, her safety was very much in question. And suspect 5, Marcus Hartwell, the brother, the estranged one, the one who hadn't been invited to a family event in 11 years. Why now? Why this dinner? When police searched Marcus's car, they found a handwritten letter, sealed, addressed to Richard, and never delivered. The contents of that letter would change everything. Toxicology came back 3 days later. Richard Hartwell had been poisoned. A compound called aconitine derived from a plant known as monkshood, odorless, colorless, and in the right dose, it mimics a heart attack so perfectly that most standard autopsies miss it entirely. Someone at that table had done their research, but here's what kept Detective Lena Marsh awake for 6 nights straight. Aconitine doesn't work instantly. It takes between 30 minutes to 2 hours to take full effect, which meant the poison wasn't administered at the table. It was administered before the dinner even began. The wine glass switch, a distraction, a misdirection so elegant it nearly worked. When Detective Marsh re-examined the estate's kitchen footage, she found it nearly 5 hours before Richard died, showing someone in the kitchen alone, adding something to a specific bottle of Richard's personal reserve wine. A bottle no one else at the table would have touched, because everyone at that table knew. Richard never shared his private reserve. The killer hadn't just planned this, they had studied him. The arrest came 11 days later. I won't tell you who it was just yet, because that, my friends, is a story that deserves its own episode. What I will tell you is this: the Hartwell case exposed something that investigators see again and again in crimes like this. The most dangerous murders aren't committed in the heat of passion. They're committed in cold blood, by someone sitting right across from you, smiling, raising a glass in your honor. Someone who had been planning it for months. Someone who had nothing left to lose or everything to gain. The question isn't always how someone was killed. Sometimes the real mystery is when the killer decided they were going to do it, and what finally pushed them over the edge. That dinner party began at 7 p.m. Richard Hartwell was already a dead man. He just didn't know it yet.